a lot of the market is not even included in some of these numbers because it's buried within these big kind of behemoth internet companies that don't break out their earnings. So for example, within Google, it's unclear exactly what the cost structures are to run YouTube, which is a huge part of their business, right? But it's tremendous, right? And within Amazon, it's unclear what the cost structures are to run Twitch. And within Facebook, it's unclear what the cost structures are to run their, video platform, right? So it's kind of all buried within just tech in general. But if 80% growing to 85% of all the bandwidth and traffic on the internet is serving video, you can imagine within those companies, a large amount of their costs are video infrastructure as well.
Layer 1 is a podcast and community dedicated to helping you master all things crypto. We'll be bringing you the best interviews with project executives, technical analysis for trading of the most popular cryptocurrencies, and insight into what's actually happening behind the scenes.
As you join us each episode, you're going to hear about tokens, fundraisers, investments, and even crypto conspiracies. But please remember that nothing we say should be considered financial or legal advice.
Come join us on this journey, and welcome to Layer 1.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Layer 1. We're happy to have you. Hopefully you're having a good week, even though we had a little bit of a pullback. I'm here with Mike Finch. Obviously, I'm here with Doug Petkanics from Livepeer. Mike is in Dallas with Dimitri this week. Mike, let them know why you're there.
Yeah, we're down here working with Zach Lee, one of the other partners under Sutler, and some other things we got going on. So it's, definitely been a crazy week so far. Loving the weather. Loving the good food. We got some pretty awesome tacos last night. But it's another exciting episode here of Layer 1 with a project that maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. It's Livepeer with the founder, Doug Petkanics. Doug, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on today, guys. Looking forward to talking about Livepeer with you.
Amazing, man. Well, for those people who, don't know about Livepeer, you guys are providing kind of efficient and cost-efficient live video infrastructure, right? So we want to get into that. But before we, go down what Livepeer is all about and what you guys have been doing like the past couple months, let's go into your background as kind of just a person up until kind of finding crypto, how you found crypto. Just give me everything.
Sure thing. So thanks for having me on. My name is Doug Petkanics. I'm a computer scientist and software engineer by background, and have had the entrepreneurial itch for a long time. So this is actually my third time founding a startup with kind of the same core group of partners each time. Our first startup, Hyperpublic, was a video infrastructure platform that had some success and got acquired by Groupon. We became their data engineering team. My second startup, Wildcard, was a mobile publishing platform with a consumer front end. We didn't have a successful business outcome there, so we built some nice products. So I've kind of been through the arc of success and the arc of startup failure. But in building that kind of mobile consumer product, my partner Eric and I did a lot of video engineering, and we felt the pain as a developer of building scalable, reliable video applications at a cost-effective price point. Simultaneously to all of this, of course, we were super interested as computer scientists in Bitcoin, in what was happening with decentralized tech. But it was really the rise of Ethereum, kind of around 2016, that really captured our attention, because instead of just being money, it was now this open development platform. And this was in kind of an aligned timeline with when we had a break after our previous startup, and we're figuring out what we were going to work on next. And we really just, as many do, fell down the rabbit hole of, Web3, decentralized tech, the rise of Ethereum, the notion that you could build any sort of open source software and you could embed economics directly into it. And so combine some of the interest we had in video, live video streaming, the rise of video with cameras on every mobile device and every computer. Combine that with our infrastructure development experience as software engineers, and our newfound obsession with Web3 and creating open protocols with economics embedded into them. And that led us to begin to research and explore the Livepeer opportunity. And I think you described it briefly as a video infrastructure platform for developers. That's right. Livepeer's mission is to build the world's open video infrastructure that enables developers and applications to build incredible streaming video apps, things like, Web3 versions of YouTube or Twitch, or Web2 versions at lower price points. And we've been working on that at Livepeer for 3 years now.
Yeah, so I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're batting 500, which is great. I just want to point that out there. But what's the interest in live video come from? Where does the interest in just video and streaming in general come from?
Sure. I mean, video is a super powerful communication platform, right? It's powerful for communication, for connecting. We're on video right now, right? It's super powerful for entertainment. You see the huge shift in people subscribing from traditional broadcasts to streaming services and getting their entertainment through non-conventional broadcast sources like Twitch and YouTube, for example, instead of turning on your cable TV. So the rise of it is interesting. But as a software engineer, it was always interesting technical challenge to create a great streaming experience that delivers video over the internet in high quality in real time to a wide number of users. And it was something we had experience building on in our previous startups as well. So that was kind of interesting video technically. Going forward, especially as I think about the economy becoming more global and more internet connected, and your location not specifically mattering so much in terms of your ability to participate in the economy, I think video is like a really leveling, connecting force. So if you have a skill or an expertise or you want to do some job, there's no reason that you can't do that and provide some service to someone halfway around the world, as long as there's an amazing video platform that you can use to connect, share your entertainment, share your skill, share your knowledge or expertise, teach a course, etc. And so I'm really excited about the types of video applications that let people do this and connect. And again, when you think about combining it with things like cryptocurrency that enables transfer of value and transfer of economics through these experiences, I think that's a really exciting future as soon as we have visionary, product entrepreneurs who can create these great experiences using the tools like Livepeer, like Ethereum, like Bitcoin, like Filecoin and IPFS and these sorts of things. Going forward. So anyway, a lot of excitement on a lot of different tracks, which led us to Livepeer.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot to unpack. We definitely want to get into some of the staking and kind of where you guys see Livepeer going next. But before we get there, what is kind of Livepeer's target market essentially? Who's your audience? Who are you really kind of solving problems for with Livepeer?
Yep, great question. So Livepeer is an infrastructure platform. It's kind of the backbone for powering video platforms and applications. So our target market is not the individual streamer, the individual broadcaster. They don't just download Livepeer and start streaming into some nice product that has a front end that's custom to their needs. Livepeer's users and target markets are the developers who build video experiences and that need to power these video applications or platforms at scale. So people building things that look like Twitch, that look like YouTube, or that look like video platforms themselves, like Vimeo, for example, could leverage Livepeer's infrastructure. And there's a couple reasons why they would do that. Number one, the one they care most about is cost. Livepeer's able to do video transcoding, which is kind of a technical concept that we could elaborate on at a small fraction of the cost of what they have to pay to existing infrastructure providers like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud. And number two is scale. So the Livepeer network has a super high scale of GPU infrastructure available to encode videos that's always online waiting to do it. So you don't have to reserve servers and scale them up and down as you go and do capacity planning. You can just send as much video into Livepeer as you want. The network will be there to handle it. And the third is reliability. Because of the reduced cost and because of the scale, Livepeer should theoretically be more reliable than these single point of failure platforms, because you can pay for redundancy, you can use providers all around the world. Though we still have a lot of work to do to prove out all of those assumptions, but we've made great progress and we're working on it.
Yeah, that I mean, you pretty much hit on every point I would imagine that a video developer has. Every box they want checked. You've got scalability as probably one of the biggest. Decentralization kind of brings that uptime, I guess, in a lot of ways, or eliminates that counterparty risk. So since you guys have launched and based on that target market, what sort of adoption have you guys seen? Right? Are there hundreds or thousands of different video developers using Livepeer? Are you still kind of building that out? Where do you guys stand today?
Great. So Livepeer launched in April 2018 to mainnet, so a little under 2 years ago. And the first year and a half, or what I would call the alpha phase, the network worked. It was functional. You could use it to stream and transcode video. And a lot of the early users were alpha users. They were people testing this new decentralized technology, and largely what they were doing was streaming events. So there was over 100 different events and meetups and presentations and conferences streamed through the network. Things like at DevCon 4, there was 5 different streams from all the breakout rooms coming out of Livepeer. A lot of crypto-oriented conferences used this because they were philosophically aligned with Livepeer's decentralization and mission. But that alpha network was functional, but it was not necessarily cost-effective, reliable, or scalable, basically because of the technology roadmap and timelines just needed to develop and make all this stuff work, but also because of early assumptions that proved out to maybe not be true about the scalability of Ethereum and its current incarnation and whatnot. So we had a big upgrade we were working on for over a year called Streamflow, and it just came out 2 months ago. And its goals were to take the alpha network and actually deploy a bunch of changes to make it reliable, scalable, and cost-effective. And that would allow a real go-to-market with the real target users who are doing video at scale. And so this is not just a conference that has 5 streams or 1 stream coming out at a time, but it's a video platform that has thousands of streams of user-generated content all around the world that it would have very high costs for encoding that video. And they couldn't have used the alpha, but now that Streamflow is out, they could use Streamflow. And we're currently in the process of going to market with Streamflow. It requires a lot of productization, a lot of business development to take a scaled enterprise onto a network like this. But we're early on and having some success with early kind of test validation points, pilots, and hope to see some scaled network usage beyond just those one-off events, in the next couple months.
Yeah, usually we like to kind of jump into a rabbit hole, maybe like 30 or 40 minutes down the episode, but I think we're hopping into one really quick because you talked about Streamflow, you talked about the protocol upgrade. So I do have a question on, how like the response was to the upgrade, right? Like you see a lot of protocols out there, they make upgrades. There's a response from either the delegators that you have or the node operators, all these things. So I wonder how that went. And then tell us about, that goes along with Streamflow, tell us about probabilistic micropayments, because that's just what this whole Streamflow protocol upgrade is about, correct? And I would like you to kind of break those down. And I think people find that interesting.
Sure thing. So the response to Streamflow, I would describe it as universally positive, and we have a pretty well-aligned community because the mechanism which we built the community early on is technical first. You earn token by participating in the network and running infrastructure or staking and delegating, as opposed to, we didn't do an ICO. There was no speculative kind of boom around Livepeer that brought in a huge network of stakeholders who might be at odds with the ultimate purpose, which is creating this highly useful video platform, right? And we had a kind of a well-publicized roadmap for steps we needed to take even from day one to go from an alpha to something that could deliver on Livepeer's promise. And so the reason it was positive is because prior to Streamflow, it was unlikely that if you were running infrastructure, you were going to earn a large amount of fees for running that infrastructure in Livepeer. You could earn an inflationary Livepeer token through the staking, and that's what helps bootstrap these networks. But in order to earn fees, there needs to be, hundreds of thousands of videos that people are paying to encode on this network, like, customers essentially of the network. And it just, there was no path to that on the alpha. So this big upgrade that included a lot of technical updates to solve scalability, reliability, cost effectiveness is what would enable those fees, and would also open up the network to move from just a small number of node operators to a much larger number of node operators. And so due to open, transparent communication, community-driven processes, along an open development period, everyone was on board with the Streamflow upgrade in a non-contentious way, and it's been received positive, and people are excited. And now they're earning some fees and starting to see fees are actually paid in Ether. Eventually, we hope they'll be paid in stablecoin like DAI. But you're seeing people actually earn Ether in conjunction with the Livepeer token they're earning through staking. And so that's spurred a lot of new interest, a lot of questions, a lot of requests for features and development, and a lot of interest in how we can generate demand and bring usage onto the platform. So that's the response to Streamflow. You mentioned probabilistic micropayments. Would it be interesting for me to talk about what that is and why we built it?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Scalability is always a topic, let's just put it that way, on Ethereum. So if you're saying that, hey, we can, kind of solve scalability at this point with Ethereum, or at least, work to, against that problem, then yeah, I would love to hear about it. I'm sure the community members would.
Sure. So in the previous incarnation of Livepeer, one of the reasons it wasn't cost effective at scale was because payments for doing work needed to be settled on chain for every kind of video job that you were encoding. So if you were going to encode my video, I would send you all the video, you would prove you encoded it correctly, and then you would cash in your payment on chain. And what would happen was, well, if the cost of doing the transaction to cash in that payment is greater than the amount of money that I owed you, then it wouldn't make any sense for you to do that transaction, right? If it was going to cost 30 cents in Ether in gas in order to do it, but I only owed you 10 cents for encoding half an hour of my video, it wouldn't be worth it to cash that in, right? And so we said, okay, we need like a layer 2 type solution. We need to move this payments off chain such that you have to do way fewer transactions, but you can still earn and cash in exactly what you're owed. And so we had done a lot of research and a big study. We considered payment channels. We considered other layer 2 solutions. And we said, okay, there's this concept called probabilistic micropayments, originally proposed by Ron Rivest of computer science fame, RSA fame, back in the 90s. The concept was you could pay people with lottery tickets. So let's say you're doing a bunch of work encoding my video, and every 2 seconds of video that you encode, I would send you a lottery ticket. And that lottery ticket may be worth something big if it wins, like $50 or $10, right? But most of them are losers, right? And so most of the time you're doing 2 seconds of work, you get a ticket, you check if it's a winner, you see it's not a winner, you just discard it. You don't need to cash anything on chain. It's worth nothing. But eventually you're going to get a winner, and it's worth $50 or whatever you want it to be worth. And that is worth it to pay the 50 cents in order to cash it in on chain, because you're going to make $49.50. You're going to make 98% of what you earned, which is more than you make if you accept a credit card, right? And so this was a really interesting concept, and it has some properties. Like, there's no way for me to determine if it's a winner or a loser. For you can set how much you want it to be worth if it wins, so that if the gas prices go up, you can say, oh, I just want my winners to be worth more. And so you're always going to make 99 or 98% of what the value that you're earning is. And the probabilities of winning mean that the expected value of every 2 seconds of work that you're doing is exactly what you want to charge. So exactly over time that you're getting paid for the amount of work that you're actually doing. You can set your own price, and you can control how much overhead you have to pay to the Ethereum network if gas prices fluctuate. So these are really nice properties. There's a couple trade-offs you make or drawbacks that we could talk about as well. But we implemented it. It wasn't invented by us. It wasn't proposed originally for use in Ethereum by us. The Orchid protocol proposed it, but I believe we were the first to implement it, to test it, to deploy it. and it's working really nicely. It's a way to scale on Ethereum today that doesn't require any layer 2 solution, doesn't require ETH 2.0, and allows people to accept payments for ongoing work.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, something we definitely need to dig into deeper. I mean, the whole Ethereum scene right now with 2.0 kind of coming up and then getting pushed back, and all of the various models that are coming out on how to scale beforehand or kind of in this middle term period of ETH 2.0. Where do you kind of stand with all of this, right? Obviously, you guys are part of the Ethereum community. Do you like how ETH 2.0 is kind of going? Do you think it needs to kind of go a little faster? Is the time okay? Where does it all sit with you?
Well, I think the intentions are great, right? Like shift to proof of stake is something that's super exciting. The notion of sharding to enable quote unquote infinite scale is a good idea. I think some of the concepts like changing the underlying virtual machine are just good technical improvements, right? So the motivations are all correct. I think it's a very hard coordination problem to think about how you upgrade this huge existing system with a lot of momentum and a lot of assumptions that people have made in the ways that they built things over to this optimistically new system. I think it's really challenging to do that. I think you're going to see a lot of these ideas implemented and emerge in other chains or platforms and be tested or validated or learned from way before you see every single ETH1 smart contract successfully migrated into an ETH2 world. So I'm not holding my breath for that. I also think ETH1 is highly useful as it is today, and don't think it necessarily should go away. So I have a little wait and see or skepticism in believing that ETH 2.0 will be this magical unicorn that solves everyone's hopes and dreams in a short-term time frame. But I still think the research and the work is worth doing, and I'm excited about what will be enabled and what can be built following the deployment of a lot of those ideas.
I have a larger question. What's that?
I was going to just say one more thing, which is we very much took the approach when we were building Livepeer that, especially in this upgrade from the alpha to Streamflow, that we could not wait or have any external dependency on any third-party research or project or promises of the ecosystem to come to be. We needed to design solutions that worked on today's existing platforms, and that's been good. We've always prioritized practicality over pure theory and want to have something useful that works. And I think that's worked, and I hope this year we'll see that this is a highly useful platform that makes an impact not just in the crypto world, but well beyond that to a real business use case.
Yeah, you guys seem to be super fortunate in that you kind of have builders that can build infrastructure as opposed to builders that just build dApps on top of the infrastructure. I think you guys can go, and build that yourselves, which you can obviously see with Streamflow. But before I hop into the bigger general question that I have is, since we're on Ethereum, what other projects within Ethereum and within the Ethereum community have stood out to you as being something that's super interesting, within the past year? Because obviously we had that ICO boom, and there was Ethereum's, going to be, big for smart contracts and all these things. And then you kind of saw these companies fail to execute and nothing really come out on Ethereum. Obviously we see DeFi rising, but what interests you in Ethereum right now?
Sure. So I'm not really a money guy. I'm not really a trader. I think DeFi is so interesting in that it can enable a virtual digital economy that can be useful in the virtual digital internet world, or these virtual economies within games, within virtual worlds, within an online only workplace and work market. But I don't understand the kind of all the financial mechanics that are going on inside of these protocols and the chase for yield and arbitrage and all this stuff. So there's probably a ton of interesting stuff going on in there. I'm not super well suited to comment on it. I look a lot more closely at Web3 type infrastructure world applications. One that we build on that is really exciting is the Graph, which is a platform for basically indexing all the on-chain data and transactions, and then being able to build aggregations, queries, have a query interface on it. So this enables you to actually build dApps that are fast, responsive, have all the data that's locked within the blockchain available, without having to do a million blockchain queries or sync archive nodes that are impossible to sync, and these
So
sorts of things. So if you haven't,
you sync the index instead of like the entire archive. Is that what you're?
The current version of the graph is like, well, it's open source software. You can run a graph node and you can sync. Yeah, you can sync the chain and you can tell it, okay, in Livepeer, for example, I could say, when you're syncing the chain, write down the total amount of stake on the network at every Ethereum block, right? And that would then enable you to build an application that says very quickly, how much stake was there on the network at this block, at this block, at this block, right? And you could generate a graph, you could make those analytics available, et cetera. Right? If you don't have an indexing layer, that's an impossible query to do. Like, you can't just ask the blockchain, what was the state 3 months ago?
Yeah.
Right. You can say, what's the state right now? And get it very simply. Right. Or you can do something like far more complex than that. Like, you can say, take the total amount of stake, break it down by the different nodes on the network to see how much they each had. When at any time stake moves from one node to another, it emits an event. Be sure to, add some value to some record in your database, and all this data can be like there, instantly available, queryable, just like a database. So it really enables you to build a dApp, just like you're building an app, and query a database with all the information you need, so you can populate the data fast, have fast user interactions, fast load times, etc. It's missing a necessary piece. And they have a vision for, okay, this index shouldn't just be run on a node that you run or the hosted service that they run. There can actually be a decentralized network that runs this index, so this data can be universally accessible, always available, always indexed and up to date. So I think that's exciting. I think the work that the Swarm team has done to focus on file storage and distributed databases are interesting. These are all kind of building blocks that we need for the dApps to actually be possible to be good user experiences.
Gotcha. Yeah, I always enjoy these interviews, and we've enjoyed them over the past months. And it's because of like the complexity of individuals like within our industry. I think there's like a mesh of like people who are super into tech and people that are super into finance and applications, and all these people just kind of mesh together. It's hard to really jump in deep to something that maybe you're an expert in and we're not. But I appreciate you like taking the time to kind of explain it to us in a way that is digestible. But just like zooming out a little bit, what the importance of Livepeer, right? Like it obviously centers around live video streaming, and people like see Twitch, they see D Live, they see all these streaming services, but like they might not know kind of like the macro statistics on like the entire industry. Yeah. Your infographic was great, and like one of the first things it says is like 80% of the entire internet bandwidth is taken up by this live video streaming, which blew my mind, right? Like there's so many, so the internet's bandwidth, 80% is being taken up by live video. But take us through like how large of a market this actually is, and where it's going to go in the future.
Yeah, so it's a huge market, especially if you just look at video over internet streaming services, right? Then you're talking about, I think the projection is 2022. Don't quote me exactly, but I think it's like $80 billion market for streaming internet video. That includes all the entertainment services and broadcast content and stuff. Things like watching Netflix are included in that, right? When you get to just the infrastructure piece alone, video is very, very expensive and hard to scale and to process. So when you combine content delivery, video encoding services, you're looking at like a $10 to $20 billion market. When you combine those things, it sustains many public companies like Akamai and Bright Cove and Limelight and even the big players like AWS and Google Cloud have huge businesses providing video infrastructure. And what's interesting is a lot of the market is not even included in some of these numbers because it's buried within these big kind of behemoth internet companies that don't break out their earnings. So for example, within Google, it's unclear exactly what the cost structures are to run YouTube, which is a huge part of their business, right? But it's tremendous, right? And within Amazon, it's unclear what the cost structures are to run Twitch. And within Facebook, it's unclear what the cost structures are to run their, video platform, right? So it's kind of all buried within just tech in general. But if 80% growing to 85% of all the bandwidth and traffic on the internet is serving video, you can imagine within those companies, a large amount of their costs are video infrastructure as well. And so, huge market, huge opportunity. Livepeer actually is starting with a kind of smaller niche of it. We have a open source media server, which is kind of the software that speaks video. It knows all the protocols, formats, and stuff. And our network, everyone who's running this software, is powering this video transcoding network. And what that does is video is often captured in really high definition, like 4K or HD video, whether it's just a stream from your camera, your webcam, or from, a sporting event or whatever the content is, it's captured in high definition. But if you want to deliver that to your, worldwide audience of people on all different devices, all different connection speeds, that video actually needs to be processed or transcoded and converted into many different formats and many different qualities and bit rates. And that's a really computationally heavy process. It's really expensive to do. And that's what the Livepeer network does. You can send video into the Livepeer network and it will convert it into all those formats and bit rates. So you can then serve it to users on, mobile phones with slow internet connections, and it'll work just fine, even though they can't download a 4K video and watch it in Ultra HD, right? And so that's kind of the starting point for Livepeer. But there's lots of opportunity in the future with our software, with our network, to tack on additional video infrastructure features.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you're obviously talking about Livepeer as it faces those who need the encoding done, right? Those video developers or video processors, whatever you kind of want to call them there. And then you also have the node network, right? The staking network. So if somebody's out there who's super interested in this, maybe they have a background in video and it's something they definitely want to get involved with on either side, right? On the staking side or on the actual activity on Livepeer, what does that look like for users, and how do they kind of go about getting involved with that?
Yeah, great question. So I think you recognize that there are two different sides, and they're completely different user groups. They don't overlap, right? Like someone building a video application is not someone who's running infrastructure on a staking network, right? So the users on the video side mostly interface with products that look like what you'd interface with the traditional video company. They use an API, or they download the open source software and follow the developer docs in order to use this network for video encoding. But let's talk about the kind of staking side, the supply side, the node operators, token delegators. They have a completely different set of products, different interfaces to Livepeer. So there's really like two roles you can play if you want to participate in the network. You can run infrastructure and earn money for doing video encoding, right? Or you can get tokens and you can stake and you can delegate towards those running infrastructure to do the work on your behalf. That's the supply side of our network, and that's largely made up of kind of crypto enthusiasts, cryptocurrency miners, and there's slightly different interfaces. Like if you just want to be a token holder, you can acquire the token through Uniswap or some decentralized exchange. You can use a web-based explorer using something like MetaMask or Portis in order to use a dashboard to stake your token and view its kind of your performance over time and your earnings and withdraw your earnings and accrue your inflationary Livepeer token and whatnot. If you want to run infrastructure on Livepeer, so you want to run a node, there you download the Livepeer open source node software. There's developer docs for how you configure it and get it started, and then you're set up to run and encode video on the Livepeer network. Our target users there are people who have a large number of GPUs that are mining cryptocurrency already. So if they're mining Ethereum or Grin or Zcash, they have these GPUs already out there deployed in data centers that have good bandwidth and high uptime. And the reason these are our targets is, this is really interesting, is those GPUs, or at least a large subset of them, they use these cores called CUDA cores in order to hash cryptocurrency. And they're already doing that. They're doing that with 100% of their capacity. But they also have video encoding chips on those cards that can't hash cryptocurrency. They're just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. And so
isn't that what the chips were originally made for, correct?
No, that's right. Yeah, I mean, a large thing that those GPUs are bought for is to do video encoding and render 3D graphics and games and whatnot, right? And so they happen to have these video encoding chips. And so what our infrastructure operators do is we say, you can continue mining. You don't have to disrupt your mining. You can make $1 a day per GPU hashing Ethereum or Grin or Zcash. But you can also concurrently encode video, and that's additional revenue for you without any opportunity cost. So it's almost a no-brainer for them to want to be able to do this. They just wish that there was thousands or millions of videos flowing through, because that would be a lot of money for them. But for now, they're participating, they're learning to operate on the network, they're earning kind of the smaller amounts of money through a lot of the test videos that are flowing through. But they're well positioned when we bring on some scaled users to provide that work at a fraction of the cost of what the cloud providers are charging.
Yeah, we're not like we don't have GPUs set up, obviously, and things like that. We're not like Bitcoin miners here or anything, but like certainly there are like physical limitations to a lot of these cards. Obviously, temperatures involved. So adding that aspect of them running at 100% capacity, but not using that other utility that they have, does that change the temperature requirements? I mean, what does that do to the actual card? Because that seems like it's adding additional work to the card.
This gets a little technical, but I think there's a simple answer, which is solved by the economics. So basically, imagine adding 14% more electricity in order to use this video encoding chip at the same time, right? And so if you were making $1 a day through your hashing, and that's around your cost, let's say you're adding 14 cents a day to use this chip for video encoding, right? Now, many cloud providers are charging $3 per hour per stream of video encoding. And using that chip on your card, you could do two at the same time. So you could make $6 an hour. You could make $72 per day for an additional 14 cents of cost. So you have a couple of options. You could reduce your hashing by 14% and give up the 14 cents in order to make way more than that. Or if you can handle the cooling and requirements, you don't even have to do that. You can just incur the additional cost. But in reality, you wouldn't be charging the $3 an hour. That wouldn't be disruptive. You would charge something that's, still, much higher than the 14 cents per day that it might cost you, but it's still way lower than the $72 a day cloud providers charging. And now that's attractive to bring a lot of demand on the network, generate additional revenue. And again, you don't have to pay anything if you're not encoding video. So there's no encoding cost. It's always profitable.
Got it. Okay. Well, so like, let's take another general look at just the entire staking ecosystem as it lives, right?
Sure.
What do you think about kind of the staking ecosystem? I don't remember exactly when staking actually, began, because I think, Mike, you brought me in a little bit afterwards. I know you guys had some nodes on Rise and Lisk. I know that was kind of like the first generation, maybe second generation, I don't know. But what do you think about kind of the ecosystem's growth, and where do you see it going? It almost seems like a bubble a little bit, right? Like you see all these staking ecosystems with, these huge APRs, and there's a lot of downward sell pressure on the token. Like, what is like the long-term viability of staking networks, and where do you see it going?
Cool. So a couple things. One is, I think there's a difference between proof of stake consensus and stake-based mechanics in order to kind of secure the work that people are doing, right? So Livepeer, for example, is not proof of stake consensus. Like, our operators are not block producers. They're not creating a ledger of agreed upon outputs or balances. We're not coming to consensus on anything. Stake in Livepeer is essentially like a security deposit that secures the work that you're doing. It's essentially saying, hey, I put down this security deposit. As such, I'm entitled to do X% of work on the network. And if I cheat or if I violate that, then I forfeit my security deposit. So it gives people confidence you can use this because of that stake, right? It creates alignment because there's a time period that you have to wait to withdraw your stake. So while you're staked, you want this network to be successful and useful. If you attack it while you're staked or harm the network, then the value of your stake will go down. So it creates a long-term alignment, it creates security, and it lets you control the economics and the incentives and route ownership of the network towards those who are staking and participating. So you mentioned APR, you mentioned inflation and yields and these sorts of things. In Livepeer, for example, the incentives are that, yes, there's inflation, there's new tokens generated every round, but those tokens only go to those who are staked. And essentially it's reallocating the ownership of this network and the ability to do work on this network in the future only towards those who are participating and staking and running infrastructure. And those who are not participating, if you're just holding the token and not staking it, you're being diluted, right? Your like ownership in this network is diminishing. And so that's a really powerful economic mechanic that can only be applied when you have a token that's unique to this ecosystem and not if it's alternate collateral for the security deposit like Ether or Bitcoin. So it's essentially a way of reallocating kind of ownership in this network, the ability to do work and compete to earn the fees, which are paid in Ether or eventually dollars, like stable coin essentially, which is the ultimate reward, right? You want to have the ability to earn that ultimate reward, the cash flow into the network. So looking at the whole ecosystem, I would say one of the biggest misconceptions, especially as it applies to Livepeer, is that like an APR or like a staking yield represents some sort of like interest rate or gain. If there's a high inflation rate, sure, you're earning more tokens every round, but it doesn't mean that those tokens should be worth as much as they were worth the day before. In fact, like the token value may go down because there's so many new tokens being printed, right? That's okay. But what you want to think about is, do I now own more of this network than I owned before? And therefore, can I earn more percentage of the fees that this network collects than I owned before? And if you can, and you believe the network value as a whole should be stable or should increase as there's more usage on the network, then surely owning a greater percentage of that network is a win, right? And so people get confused when they say, oh, there's a 150% ARR on this staking yield. Yes, if you're just counting the tokens, you have 150% more tokens. They may be worth less though. But instead you should be saying, oh, a year from now, instead of owning 1% of the network, I'm going to own 1.2% of the network and be able to, earn 1.2% of the fees that flow through. And that's valuable to me. And that's like the game that I'm in this for. So I know that was a long rant and maybe confusing, but hopefully that clarifies a little bit about how I think about these staking networks.
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest conversations around the various staking networks that exist today, at least on this podcast, has been exchanges and kind of the impact that they have had and continue to have in a lot of these staking networks. So, I mean, based on what you said, do you see an issue with so many of these centralized exchanges dominating a lot of these staking networks, or could that in some way, help push forward that staking network?
I think it depends what the incentives of the network are and what sort of behavior they're trying to encourage. So if the large exchange player is adding a lot of value to the ecosystem by results of doing effective work on the network through staking, then sure, it can be beneficial. It also depends if there's governance rights attached and they've pooled all of this, collective voting power to swing the governance votes on the network in the favor of the exchange. But so using Livepeer
Right.
as an example, like if they were just throwing down a huge amount of stake, but they were not running infrastructure at all, they were not encoding video, and they put all the stake on a single node that was also not performing correctly, I think that they would be doing a disservice to the network. They'd be routing a lot of work, putting a lot of security on a node that wasn't able to compete or perform it well enough. And I actually think, I believe the market would correct it, because they wouldn't be earning enough yield on that stake, because someone who's out competing that node would be earning more of the fees and more of the ether. And so all of the delegators who have, I guess, all the tokens that exchange holds on behalf of its users that are being staked wouldn't be earning the yield that it could be earning if they were routing it towards the effective kind of global operators on the network.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they were optimized, if they were spreading out that stake, if they were creating a global network, if they were putting enough security on each node to let it win work and be trusted and compete in this network, then they would be doing a service to the network. They would be providing the right QA. They would be highly involved, and that would be helpful. So it just kind of depends on what they're doing, how they're participating, what their motivations are.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about orchestrators and delegators and how they kind of work on your network. So as far as the fees that are accrued, right? Like you talked about earning ETH and you talked about earning the Livepeer token. Where exactly in that process is someone like a user, so maybe like an orchestrator, earning the ETH as opposed to the LPT, or vice versa?
Yep. So when you stake, and you do that as an orchestrator to provide security of your own node, or you do it as a delegator who stakes towards an orchestrator. So when you stake, each round, which is about a day, you earn some inflationary Livepeer token, right? So kind of your staking reward is in Livepeer token. Now, when a user comes in to use this network to encode video, they're paying that orchestrator who does that video encoding work directly in Ether, right? And ideally, they're sending in hundreds of streams, and this work is being distributed all around the world, depending on where the videos originate from, to all the orchestrators. And so they're sending Ether to all these orchestrators, right? So that's the fees that you earn from doing work. Now, the orchestrators advertise called a fee share percentage. They're saying, I'm going to share 2% of the fees I earn back to people who delegate towards me, because they're providing security, they're routing work towards me. And so delegators will see some fees in Ether actually accrue in their accounts as well, right? And in the early days, it's all Livepeer token, very little fees. And in the long term, you want millions of dollars of fees flowing into this network, and the inflation rate of Livepeer token will come down due to the kind of crypto economics, and you'll be earning less Livepeer token, kind of like the Bitcoin ecosystem, right? You think over time there's less and less Bitcoin mined every day, but there's more and more usage in terms of fees. And ultimately, if you've achieved this highly useful network that's the backbone for global internet infrastructure, you have lots and lots of fees that are spread up amongst those who are operating on the network.
Gotcha. Well, that answer kind of ran up to one of my final questions, because we are running up to your hard stop here, where we've been going almost an hour. If you guys didn't see this, obviously, but we completely botched the introduction to this interview. So we had a kind of a less amount of time before Doug had to leave us. But you talked about that goal, right, of having a lot of millions of dollars of fees, because people are, distributing or pushing their live video feeds through this network. How do you get there? What is the roadmap to get to this point where the network is now successful and it kind of has that feedback loop going on?
Yep. So, it starts with the technical capability, right? And we've taken a lot of good steps with Streamflow. So it's working pretty well. It's really close. It's certainly usable for some use cases, if not all enterprise security use cases yet. But right, we have to continue developing the technology along with the community and the operators on the network. But the piece of bringing on the demand to the network, right? Livepeer is open. Anyone can download the software and start using this network. But what we've found, and this is not a surprise, the video developers that need to leverage this network's capabilities don't overlap with the crypto-oriented kind of open source enthusiast who's going to download a node, fund it with Ether, learn about Livepeer token, like these sorts of things, right? And so there's a company, Livepeer Inc., that exists in parallel to the open network, which, our main objective or our whole aligning principle is to drive demand to the Livepeer network. And how do we do that? We build the products and services that scaled video applications need in order to take advantage of the superpower of the Livepeer network. And that looks like traditional kind of video, SaaS and open source plugin products, right? It's meeting the existing market, not waiting for the magical futuristic Web3 versions of all these apps to emerge, but it's going to video platforms that have hundreds of thousands of streams, doing traditional BD, traditional sales, traditional product development, to let them learn about this, to evaluate it and test in pilots, and then to onboard into the ecosystem. And I think what you'll see as a result is you'll see step function kind of growth in the early days in the network, from a low amount of streams to a larger amount as these opportunities convert, rather than seeing kind of like the slow gradual growth of a new dApp that has no users to a couple to many, because that's certainly possible, but that's, it's very hard to create an innovative product that scales from scratch, right, to create the next TikTok. But we want to support that. We want that to happen. We're not waiting for it to happen. We're going to existing demand and onboarding them today, and that should be good for everybody.
That's awesome, man. This has been absolutely fascinating. We got, 2 final points here, or 2 final questions. The first is one that we ask every single guest. I know Q gets a lot of recommendations off this, but your favorite book that you've read, anytime at all, last few weeks, whatever it may be. We need 1 book recommendation from you.
Oh boy, this is a tough one. What did I read recently? I liked Becoming Ultra, which is not a book about crypto. It's a book about endurance athletes, and kind of the dedication and the distances they tackle and what's involved, and how you push yourself to overcome these huge obstacles. It turns out it's all mental, and we're all capable of like tremendous endurance and doing these incredible things, but it's always the brain that gets in the way. So I thought that was a really interesting book that might be outside of the box for the type of recommendations you usually get.
Yeah, no, that's great. Some of those ultra marathon runners that it's you're referring to, I assume, are, just wild, 100 miles, 150 miles, 200 miles, just pretty much straight, and go through some, pretty grueling tasks. It's often like on mountains and these other things. So yeah, I'm somewhat familiar, but we'll definitely check that out. So
yeah, a lot of good parallels to entrepreneurship there. I think it's a long distance journey.
For those who are interested in, joining the Livepeer network, following Livepeer, what's kind of the best way for them to get in touch and maybe learn more about Livepeer or participating in your ecosystem?
Great. Yeah. Visit livepeer.org. It's our website, a little out of date. We're bringing it up to date, but it has all the links to the resources you need to learn about it, including livepeer.org/primer, which is a great 10-minute starting point that covers these complex topics. We're at livepeer.org on Twitter. And what I'd really recommend doing, though, is following the link to our chat room. It's our Discord chat where our whole team is. I'm there, community's there. Totally open and supportive community. So don't hesitate to show up, to talk directly to us, send me an @message. I'm at DOB. And we'd love to have everyone get involved.
Yeah, if you're on Twitter, do not direct message Doug. We tried to set this up via direct message, and we had much more success through the other platforms. But Doug, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for making time for us today. It was a great interview. Hopefully, have you on. As you guys go on, maybe another 6 months goes by, we'll have you back on and see how you guys are coming.
Great, thanks for having me. See you later.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to check out Layer 1 on all the audio and video platforms listed in the description. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next week.